This is the second time, actually, that I visit with you, but the first one was 15 winters ago. I had just moved into Ottawa, and I was looking for a place where I could take roots, and someone guided me to you. But back then, you were not here, which is wonderful. You were at the Royal Oak, downstairs, and I arrived late because I was still figuring out the streets. I didn't know where to park. There was snow everywhere, and the workshop has already finished. It was packed, but someone found a chair for me. I think somebody even bought me a beer, and then they asked me, would you like to read? No, I'm not a poet. Well, you don't have to be a poet. You can just read anything you wrote. No, why would I ever want to read anything I wrote? So I just sat there and listened in this world where people wrote and took their writing up to a mic and read it to strangers. It was unimaginable. And here I am. The story I thought I would bring to you tonight took place just before then, just before I moved to Ottawa. And it's one of those stories that I like because it shines a light on a moment in time. A moment that is like a hinge, like a turning point. One of those moments where two rivers meet and stream inevitably to their ocean. In a way, it's the story of how I began here in Canada. I tell fairy tales and folk tales. So, like a fairy tale, this story too begins with someone who was going about their ordinary life when something out of the ordinary happened, changed the course of events, and set the story going. If it were a fairy tale, I would say, once upon a time, in a faraway country, it isn't a fairy tale, but it begins a little bit like that. So I'll say, once upon a time, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, I was going about my ordinary life, working, studying, freelancing, thriving as a conference interpreter, when I was assigned as the lead interpreter to World Bank consultant Mr. Singh, who was visiting Buenos Aires to monitor the terms of a loan between the World Bank and the Argentinian government. Now, by fairy tale law, this is when I should show you a little bit of what everyday life was like. So everyday life, I live by myself in my own condo. I owned 16 pairs of shoes with matching purses, 12 business suits in shades of blue, beige, and gray, matching overcoat and raincoat, glass, steel, carpet. Outside my condo, wide avenues, 14 million people, restaurants, nightclubs, shops, 24/7 traffic jam. Inside, control. I did not cook. I did not shop for groceries. I did not vacuum. I did not clean. I did not iron. A professional was hired to perform those complex tasks so that I could devote myself single-mindedly to polish the story of me. And the story of me had one purpose and one purpose only. The story of me was an arrow that led exactly to an interpreting booth in the United Nations. Oh yes, that was my life. A masterpiece where the birds did not fly and the river did not flow, because every stroke of the brush was just perfect. So there I was, that was my life, when I met World Bank consultant Mr. Singh. Now, when I met Mr. Singh, I did not know, how could I, that he was about to become a central character in my life. Truth be told, when I met Mr. Singh, I hated him for the first hour and a half. First of all, Mr. Singh arrived late. First meeting with the Chief of Cabinet. So the Chief of Cabinet had to pause everything going on so that I could fill in Mr. Singh. Second of all, Mr. Singh smoked like a chimney, one after the other, one after the other. So there was always this little cloud of smoke around him. And third of all, for the first hour and a half, Mr. Singh did not utter a word. So I had to stick out my neck into the little cloud of smoke, mouth glued to his ear, whispering in English everything that outside the cloud was being said in Spanish. And then Mr. Singh stabbed out his cigarette and spoke in metaphors. I'm very vulnerable to metaphors. And he quoted Rumi, whom I have never heard of, but I became instantly very vulnerable to Rumi. And he finished all his sentences with strong, one-syllable verbs. And I'm very vulnerable to strong, one-syllable verbs. Has it ever happened to you that just when you thought you were finally fully awake, your whole life turned into just the bed where you had been sleeping in? It was just like that. And over the course of that World Bank mission, the old story of me shed, tossed with the crumpled bed sheets of yesterday. And the new story of me began, the true story of me. And the true story of me was, well, him. I had to be with him, or I would die. So, in less than 3 months, I dismantled my condo, my interpreting career, and my life to marry this man who no one I knew had ever met, and move into a country that I could not even place on a map. What could go wrong with any of that? My friends brought lists. My family urged me to reconsider. For God's sake. But who needs God when you have a story? The story of you, awaiting you at the gates. Love, larger than life, love, that would be my life. The masterpiece, where birds did not fly, and the river did not flow, because every stroke of the brush was just perfect. And so I did move out of Buenos Aires, Argentina, to Kempville, Ontario, to the first house of a dead-end road that was not even paved, that was between nothing and the Ritter River. On that road, when my marriage ended, the story of me ended. everything that had ever been me. Job, family, friend, language, country. I had let go for this one purpose, this one larger than life. Now gone. Me gone with it. I was no one. Nothing. At best, a flat wall. Bare. Pockmarked. From where a masterpiece had once hung. Cracked and broken. It was 2002, May. I moved only once a week to drive to a course on 20th century literature at Carleton University. I had enrolled in the winter just to keep things going. Mostly reading. In Kempville, Ontario, spring pulsed with summer. Among 20 snowy mountains, the only moving thing was the eye of the blackbird. Back then, I thought to myself, why did I register in this course? Now, I think that what moves the eye of the blackbird knows, under what guise it must fly to be allowed to move you. So I kept reading. And one afternoon in July, I was moved to drive 2 chapters and buy myself a copy of Writing Fiction by Janet Borroway. I really thought I wanted to write, to be a writer. Now, I think that what moves the eye of the blackbird saw that at 34, my life as I knew it was over. It was done. And whatever happened next, it would be the stuff of fiction for me to imagine. And I would need more narrative tools than I had to write myself back from scratch. So there. Early one morning, I sat myself at my desk, face to the window, and started to read, to study, to learn the writing process. Keeping a journal, clustering, free writing, story instructor. Keep going. I kept going. Until I arrived at chapter 3, Building Character. In fiction, said Janet Borroway, in order to be good, characters must want, and want intensely. What did I want? Well, I wanted to write. And here I was, writing. Good for me, not for story. Conflict, Janet Borroway will tell you, the impediment to achieving the desire. Conflict is the fundamental element of story. No conflict, no story. So, what else did I want? I journaled. I clustered. I free wrote. I was still young. I wanted a baby. Conflict. No husband, no money, no job. Lists, Janet Borroway will tell you, are a remarkably potent tool to jostle the muse into manifesting. So I listed all the steps that, to my knowledge, had led others to motherhood. Well, in all the lists I made, having sex ranked first and foremost. Conflict. 2002. Kenville, Ontario. I lifted my gaze off the page and out the window, down the road, rolled the turquoise Toyota of the neighbor. We lived on the same dead-end road. I had seen him arrive in July, leave in September. The rest of the year he played the guitar and sang on cruise ships around the world. He wasn't Leonard Cohen talented, but he was black, leather handsome. And he said, "Hey," a lot. And he had black, rustled hair and long, curly eyelashes and the dazzling smile of a $1 million car salesman. It was a dead-end road. But Janet Borroway said that the whole point of free writing is just to keep us going, not to worry that we're making sense. We are making sense. May come later. So, on a bright yellow page, I free wrote a greeting, a question, its only two possible answers, and two arrows leading to each respective outcome. One arrow led from yes to my phone number. Another arrow led from no to a big blue sea where a ship was sailing, and on board a guitar in the arms of a smiling sailor. I slipped the page into an envelope. I slipped the envelope into his mailbox. And what do you know? Early next morning, my phone rang. It was a Friday. By Friday evening, wasn't I sitting on the neighbor's kitchen countertop, swinging my legs, sipping red wine, while the neighbor sautéed chicken legs, mashed potatoes, ripped heads of green leafy lettuce, chopped onions and garlic, and sliced open fresh plump tomatoes. When we had dipped the last of the Italian bread in the last of the balsamic dressing, on my plate, just clean chicken bones. "Hey," he said. He said I looked so skinny he didn't think I would eat anything. "Hey," he said, "let's go outside." What about babies? What about babies? Well, can you still... That what you want from me? I do not know what to prefer. If the beauty of inflections or the beauty of innuendos, if the blackbird whistling or just after. It was a very naked summer. I learned how to cook. He played the guitar. We canoed on Black Lake. Under the rain, we rippled the water. And then one morning in September, he reached over my pillow for his guitar pick and wrote all across my back, "Drive me to airport on Sunday." He checked in. I walked him to security. He smiled his dazzling $1 million car salesman smile and said, "Hey, if I was ever looking for a wife to settle down." I punched him. And we hugged. I cried a little. And when that blackbird flew out of sight, it drew the edge of one of many, many circles. I returned to my desk, to my writing fiction by Janet Burroway. I think it must have been late fall when I arrived at page 100. The title was Round and Flat Characters. In fiction, said Janet Burroway, in order to be good, characters should rather be round instead of flat. Flat characters, she said, were invariable, had only one purpose. Whereas round characters, they are multifaceted, like prisms, and they are, like we hope to be, capable of change. She said there were some critics that even went as far as to say that all good, beautiful characters are created round. It's just that from where we stand on the page, they may seem to us some more round than others. From where I stood on my page, I looked out the window to the road below. It was a dead-end road. But then again, was it not the point of free writing just to keep us going? To keep us going no matter what. So I took my pen and I wrote in my writer's notebook. I wrote, "We'll never be central characters in each other's life. But because our verbs have been strong and true, we have been central enough to deliver each other to the next page of our story. And isn't that," I wrote, "isn't that what the beauty of flat characters is all about?" And then, from a box in the basement, I retrieved a parting gift. It was a framed quote by Rumi. It said, "There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground." I posted it on my wall. And then I wrote, "Hey." "Hey," I wrote in my writer's notebook. "My river is flowing. My blackbird must be flying." Thank you very much.